Jeffrey Dahmer is kind of like evil. He kills her. I don't know whether you ate him, but you might have eaten some. Did you try to eat flesh? Eat flesh? Eat people?
This is Hadden Clark, a deeply disturbed man who became the prime suspect in the brutal murder of 23-year-old Laura Houghteling. In the interrogation room, detectives thought they had him in control, but his chilling behaviors only proved otherwise. With every turn, more and more shocking revelations came to light. What deep, dark secrets hidden behind that indifferent face? Before we dive in this unsettling story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss our new videos. On October 19, 1992, it was a typical Monday morning in Washington, D.C., until the clock struck 9 a.m. and Laura Houghteling didn't show up for work. This was strange. She was never late. By 11 a.m., her boss grew increasingly concerned and reached out to Hillary Houghteling, Laura's daughter, hoping she might know where Laura had gone. But Hillary had no answers either. With growing worry, Hillary made her way to Laura's house, which she shared with her mother, Penny Houghteling. Laura's car was parked outside, but no one answered the door. Penny had left on Saturday, October 17th, for a week-long conference, leaving Laura alone. With no other leads, Hillary called Laura's brother, Warren, and left a message on his answering machine. When Warren got home from work, the message raised the hairs on the back of his neck. He and Laura were incredibly close, and something didn't sit right. He went to her house. Her car was still there. The house looked untouched, no signs of foul play. But something was off. After searching the house thoroughly, Warren called everyone he could think of, friends, relatives, but no one had seen or heard from Laura. As hours passed, Warren scoured the area for signs of her, but found nothing. By midnight, he decided to call the local police. Officers soon arrived to inspect the home. Without finding anything out of the ordinary, they reassured Warren that most missing persons were usually found safe, and this was likely just a temporary situation. Little did they know, this case would take a much darker turn. The next morning, Warren reached Penny at her conference and broke the news. Penny decided to fly back home, though she wasn't deeply worried. She believed her daughter had simply gone off on some adventure. But as time went on, tension grew among Laura's friends and family. The more they thought about it, the more it didn't make sense. There was no reason for Laura to leave on her own without telling anyone. They checked her bank accounts, credit cards, and checking account. Nothing. No withdrawals, no spending, nothing that would explain how she was surviving somewhere. By Wednesday, October 21st, the police expanded their search to the nearby woods, but found no trace of Laura. Trying to spread the word further, they reached out to a local TV station, hoping that airing her disappearance might bring in some information.
If you know anything about the disappearance of Laura Houghteling, please call Montgomery County Police. She is 6 feet tall, 145 pounds, with brown eyes and shoulder-length blonde hair.
Just as things seemed to be at a standstill, investigators got their first real clue. A neighbor came forward, saying she saw Laura on the morning of October 19th, around the time Laura would normally leave for work. But when she waved, Laura ignored her. More strangely, Laura was wearing slacks and a long jacket. Penny knew her daughter's style well, and Laura never dressed that way. Nevertheless, detectives passed this information along to the media, hoping it might trigger someone's memory. Then, something completely unexpected happened. A call came in from a psychic in Virginia. "I don't know anything about this case, but I have a strong feeling you need to search the wooded area between two churches." A psychic's tip seemed far-fetched, but in their desperation to find any clue, the detectives decided to follow it. What they uncovered next would leave them stunned. Just 4 days after Laura's disappearance, the search team found women's shoes, clothing, and a pillowcase in these woods, stained by dirt and decaying leaves. But after a closer look, detectives realized the stains weren't from leaves at all, but actually from blood. The pattern on the pillowcase matched the one found on Laura's bed. Even more troubling, the blood on it belonged to Laura. What had started as a missing persons case was now a full-blown homicide investigation. Laura's bedroom became a crime scene, and forensic experts were called in to examine it. In the meantime, Laura's mother pointed out something odd. Both the mattress pad and the bottom sheet were missing from Laura's bed. When the forensic team tested the mattress with luminol, they uncovered a horrifying sight. It was covered in blood. The pattern showed clear signs that someone had been dragged off the bed. It was a chilling moment for everyone. Something terrible had happened here, and they knew Laura was likely dead. The amount of blood led investigators to believe that she had been killed on her own bed. The entire room was examined, and all of Laura's belongings were taken for further analysis. As the devastating news spread, her family and friends were crushed by the grim reality. Who could have killed her, and why? At first, no one had any answers, but then a strange detail from Laura's brother, Warren, caught the detective's attention. The first night Laura went missing, Warren had seen a familiar figure, his family's gardener, Hadden Clark. The man was driving by, and Warren tried to stop him to talk. But suddenly, he sped away, leaving Warren puzzled and uneasy. When later confronted, Hadden claimed he hadn't stopped because he was afraid of a carjacking. But detectives weren't buying it. This 40-year-old gardener seemed to have both the means and the opportunity to commit the crime. Penny had hired Hadden Clark in early 1992, thinking she was helping out a homeless man. Hadden proved to be a reliable worker and became quite attached to Penny, like a mother figure. Penny even trusted him enough to give him a key to the house. However, even with that trust, Penny always knew that Hadden was deeply troubled. She recalled how strange his behavior was. When given simple tasks, like digging a flower bed in the backyard, he would dig obsessively, not knowing when to stop. Yet a more disturbing detail came to light. Just a few days before Laura's disappearance, Penny had a heated argument with Hadden. She accused him of stealing some tools from her backyard shed and yelled at him. This confrontation raised the detectives' eyebrows, prompting them to look closer at Hadden. In the interrogation room, Hadden acted super weird. When learning that Laura was missing, Hadden suddenly kneeled down and exclaimed, "Oh my God, I just want to die." He did offer an alibi for the time of Laura's disappearance, but his over-the-top reaction, combined with his odd behavior, made the police suspect him even more. On October 26, 1992, officers searched Hadden's truck and found some shocking items, like bedding, hair samples, and documents, including a checkbook register and receipts. The receipts were meticulous, with even the smallest purchases detailed, like $10 worth of gas and $4 for power bars. But one discovery sent shivers down their spines. A purchase for duct tape, braided ropes, and nylon cords made just days before Laura went missing. All items were paid with a personal check. In the memo section, just one word appeared: Laura. As detectives dug deeper, they discovered Hadden had rented a storage unit in Warwick, Rhode Island, 450 miles away from Laura's home. Hadden visited the unit on the morning of October 21st, just 2 days after Laura's disappearance. With a search warrant in hand, they went to the storage facility. Inside, they found a collection of women's clothing, including bras, dresses, shoes, and wigs, everything needed for someone to disguise themselves as a woman. This forced the detectives to reconsider everything they thought they knew about the case. The witness who had seen Laura on the morning of October 19th might have actually seen Hadden disguised in a blonde wig. But even with these unsettling revelations, detectives still lacked the concrete evidence that linked Hadden to Laura's disappearance and death, until one big discovery came. When forensic experts examined a hairbrush found in Laura's room, they identified 30 hairs that matched Laura's. But one hair stood out. It wasn't human. It was synthetic, commonly used in wigs. The blonde wig found in Hadden's storage unit was quickly examined, and it was a perfect match. The shock didn't end there. A partial bloody fingerprint found on a pillowcase was a match to none other than Hadden Clark's. This was the breakthrough police needed to make an arrest. Yet one roadblock remained. Without Laura's body, they couldn't prove that a murder had actually occurred. On November 6, 1992, police brought Hadden in for questioning. Little did they know, they were dealing with a man who had no intention of cooperating. Hadden only opened his mouth to ask for a lawyer.
Is God talking to you?
God's talking to me.
Wow. I bet he's telling you that you need to help yourself.
He told me to see my lawyer.
What can you tell me about Laura? Do you think she's pretty? Did she do something to make you angry? She hurt your feelings?
Hadden, do you have a thing for pillows?
Hadden remained cold. He wasn't just a man refusing to speak. He was a man who was completely impossible to read and terrifying to be around. Meanwhile, another team of detectives began investigating Hadden's past, trying to uncover any new leads. What they found would take the investigation into a much darker turn. Hadden Clark was the second child in a family of 4, and from a young age, his behavior was deeply troubling. He had a chilling interest in killing and dissecting animals. His complete lack of empathy even extended to his own family members. It was clear from the start that something was wrong, mentally. Hadden spent time in various specialized schools to address his antisocial tendencies, but nothing seemed to improve. In 1985, Hadden was diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia. With nowhere else to go, his younger brother Jeffrey offered him a place to stay in Silver Spring, Maryland. This arrangement marked the beginning of a dark chapter in Hadden's life, one that would eventually draw the attention of the police. By May of 1986, Hadden's increasingly disturbing behavior became too much to tolerate. He was caught doing inappropriate activities in front of Jeffrey's children. Outraged, Jeffrey kicked him out. As Hadden packed his belongings, Jeffrey took his family out for the day, leaving Hadden alone at the house. This brief absence set the stage for an unthinkable tragedy. Carl Dorr, a neighbor of Jeffrey's, had a 6-year-old daughter, Michelle Dorr. On Memorial Day weekend, 1986, while Michelle was playing in a plastic pool in the backyard, Carl went inside to relax and eventually fell asleep on the couch. When he woke up, it was already past 5:45 p.m. Panic set in when he couldn't find Michelle. He frantically went outside and called for her, but there was no response. In a rush of fear, he walked to Jeffrey Clark's house, hoping Michelle had gone to visit her friend Elizabeth. But Michelle wasn't there. Panicked, Carl searched the entire neighborhood, combing every area he could think of. But there was no sign of her. Desperate, he dialed the police. The investigation into Michelle's sudden disappearance kicked off immediately. For the next 48 hours, the Maryland police launched an extensive search, but still, there was no trace of Michelle. Detectives began speaking to locals, including Hadden Clark, who had long been seen as a bit of an oddball in the neighborhood. His strange, erratic behavior only added to the suspicion that he might be involved. During the questioning, Hadden seemed irritated and made a strange comment, admitting that he might have done something but couldn't remember. This raised more red flags, but Hadden had a solid alibi. To everyone's surprise, that alibi came from none other than Michelle's father, Carl. Carl claimed he had seen Michelle around 2:10 p.m. on the day she vanished, while at 2:46 p.m., Hadden was captured at the Chevy Chase Country Club. This 36-minute time gap was small, making it hard to imagine Hadden could have been involved. Without physical evidence, the police had no choice but to release him. After weeks of searching, the hunt for 6-year-old Michelle Dorr eventually came to an end, as no lead was found. The case remained unsolved. Her family mourned, while Hadden continued his life. In September 1988, Hadden was caught harassing his own mother. He was charged with assault and battery and sentenced to probation. Not long after, in December of the same year, Hadden was evicted by his landlord. In a fit of revenge, he set booby traps around the house, resulting in charges of property destruction. Despite these troubling actions, he managed to avoid jail time. Then, in February of the following year, he was caught stealing purses and coats from a church while dressed as a woman. He pleaded guilty to the theft and served a brief 45-day sentence in jail. For the next few years, Hadden stayed out of the public eye, moving frequently and taking on various low-paying jobs. But in 1992, his life took a new turn when Penny Houghteling hired him as a gardener. Unknowingly, Penny's goodwill would lead to a horrific crime. This new information was overwhelming for the detectives. As they prepared for Hadden's next interrogation, they knew they were about to uncover the darkest parts of his mind. To provoke a reaction from Hadden Clark, detectives brought in a teddy bear wearing a bathing suit, similar to what Michelle Dorr had on when she disappeared. They held the bear in their lap without allowing him to touch it and made its arms move. Hadden's eyes immediately widened. A sinister smile spread across his face. The smirk was chilling, yet he remained silent and gave no indication he wanted to discuss Michelle or her disappearance. Refusing to give up, detectives took turns entering the room, each adopting a different persona to break through Hadden's emotional walls. They became more direct, confronting him about his violent urges. "You crave blood, don't you? The taste, the feeling? Did you do that to Laura?" Hadden didn't respond. He simply remained still. Frustrated, detectives tried to shock him further, bringing up notorious cases like Jeffrey Dahmer's cannibalistic killings to stir something inside him. But Hadden was completely unfazed. Over the course of a tense 3-hour interrogation, detectives began to notice something strange. Hadden had a severe aversion to being touched. They decided to exploit this weakness.
You have to pat me like that? Hit me? I'm not hitting you. I just like to be friendly. Okay? Why don't you just sit over there? No, God, no. Come on. Sit over there. You want to smoke? I sit over here? No. We're going to sit together. I sit over here. You and I are going to be friends.
Hadden grew increasingly uncomfortable, fidgeting and moving uncomfortably in his chair. The tension in the room grew as detectives continued to push his buttons, trying to see how far they could take him. The more they pressed, the more Hadden resisted, almost like a child throwing a tantrum. Finally, after exhausting every possible method, detectives found themselves at a dead end. Fortunately, a breakthrough came. Hadden was being formally charged with the murder of Laura Houghteling. With this, investigators tried to convince him that his only option was to confess, presenting the idea that he wasn't mentally well. But Hadden didn't budge. Eventually, Hadden Clark was taken into custody. Detectives believed that he wasn't lacking intelligence, but rather he was manipulative and used silence as his weapon to avoid the truth. For the next 8 months, Hadden sat in detention while prosecutors prepared for a high-stakes trial. Despite numerous police searches spanning 3 states, Laura's body had yet to be found. With no body, no witnesses, and no confession, the case only rested on 2 key pieces: a synthetic hair found at the scene and Hadden's fingerprint on a pillowcase. The lack of concrete evidence casted doubt on whether a conviction could be secured. Laura's family and friends feared the worst. If the prosecutors failed, Hadden could be acquitted. And even if Laura's body were eventually discovered, the Fifth Amendment would prevent him from being tried again for the same crime. In a dramatic turn of events, just before the scheduled trial date in June 1993, Hadden stunned everyone by pleading guilty. As part of the plea bargain, Hadden revealed the twisted reasons behind his actions.
I love pain. We also eat donuts, drink. We came down, and tonight you eat breakfast. And then when Laura came into the picture, a lot of that stuff stopped.
In Hadden's disturbed mind, he had come to see Penny as a mother figure, but this feeling was anything but typical. He had developed an unhealthy obsession with her, and that's why he didn't like Laura. To him, Laura represented everything he couldn't have: beautiful, well-liked, and loved by her family. Basically, he wanted to be her, or more accurately, replace her. Hadden's resentment toward Laura had been building for some time. But it was the argument with Penny just days before the murder that finally pushed him over the edge. When she told him she would be leaving town that weekend, Hadden saw this as the perfect opportunity to carry out his twisted plan. And he decided it was time for Laura to pay, simply for being in his way. At around midnight on October 19, 1992, Hadden stealthily approached the front door. He knew the house well and had prepared for the moment. Wearing a dress, he retrieved the key and entered with a gun in hand. Walking into Laura's bedroom, Hadden held the gun to her head, warning her in a cold voice that any movement would lead to his pulling the trigger. What followed was a nightmare of violence. With a chilling calm, he handcuffed her, bound her with rope, and then suffocated her with duct tape. Once she fell still, he removed the tape with scissors. but in the haste his hand slipped and the sharp edge cut deeply into her neck. Blood soaked the sheets and pillowcase, but Hadden didn't stop. He went further, severing one of Laura's ears while trying to remove an earring. He then lingered by her body for nearly an hour, seemingly lost in his own deranged satisfaction. Until around 3 a.m., he wrapped Laura's lifeless body in a sheet, hoisted it over his shoulder, and hid it in his truck bed. Returning to the house, he meticulously gathered the blood-stained bedding, driving it to a secluded wooded area to dispose of it. Afterward, he went back to the house, changed the sheets, and erased all traces of his crime before going to bed as if nothing had happened. The next morning, in a disturbing display, Hadden dressed as a woman, putting on wigs to feed his warped fantasies. He used Laura's comb to adjust his wig, leaving behind a single synthetic hair. Hadden's confession was nothing short of shocking, but what followed was even more disturbing. He later agreed to lead an assistant state's attorney to where Laura's body was buried. She was found in a shallow grave, tucked away in a wooded area near a highway ramp in Rockville, just outside Bethesda. The finding allowed her loved ones the chance to lay her to rest, but the emotional weight of the situation was still immense. One of Laura's friends recalled, "It was good that her family could bury her, but it didn't feel like relief. Nothing about it felt better." The case seemed to have reached its conclusion, and Hadden was sentenced to 30 years in prison for Laura's murder in June 1993. However, Hadden's story was far from over. In 1999, Jack Truitt, another convicted murderer, was placed in the same cell as Hadden at the Eastern Correctional Institution in Maryland, and Truitt quickly realized he wasn't prepared for what was about to come. One of Hadden's strange habits was hoarding food, letting it rot, and then consuming it days later. But what truly unnerved Truitt was when Hadden started confessing to him, as he believed Truitt to be Jesus Christ. In his delusional state, he started revealing chilling details. "I've killed someone in every state." Desperate to escape the disturbing conversations, Truitt came up with a plan. "Don't talk to me about it. Just write it down when you feel the need to share," he suggested. Hadden agreed and began to draw. The drawings were horrific, depicting crime scenes and detailed sketches that suggested many other victims. Truitt couldn't have anticipated that his time with Hadden would open up a new, horrifying chapter in the story. At first, he paid little attention to Hadden's bizarre ramblings, but things took a turn when Hadden mentioned Michelle Dorr's death. Realizing the potential value of this information, Truitt saw an opportunity to use Hadden's words for his own advantage. If he could get Hadden to open up, it might help him reduce his sentence. After some convincing, Truitt managed to persuade Hadden to speak. The two agreed that Hadden would talk to the detectives in Truitt's presence, and Hadden began recounting his dark history. On May 31, 1986, he had been furious with his brother for kicking him out of the house. Tragically, that's exactly when Michelle Dorr wandered over to the Clark house to find her friend, Elizabeth. When Hadden saw Michelle, he immediately felt an urge to kill her. As a former chef, he had access to knives, which he used to carry out the brutal attack. Hadden described throwing Michelle to the floor and overpowering her so quickly that she didn't even have time to scream. He continued the attack without mercy until Michelle was gone. After that, he cleaned up the blood, placed Michelle's body in a plastic bag, and concealed it inside a duffel bag. He then casually placed the bag in the back of his truck and went to work as if nothing had happened. Once his shift ended, he drove to a wooded area in Maryland and buried Michelle's body. In a chilling revelation, he also confessed to having eaten parts of her flesh before burying her. With this horrifying statement, the detectives now had enough to charge Hadden with Michelle's murder. As a result, he was sentenced to an additional 30 years, on top of his earlier sentence for Laura Houghteling's murder. Meanwhile, Truitt, who had helped reveal this crucial information, was later granted parole for his cooperation. However, at the end, Hadden still refuses to tell the exact location of Michelle's remains. In January 2000, Hadden Clark made another surprising turn. He led authorities to a secluded ravine near Route 29 in Silver Spring, Maryland, claiming that this was the location where he had buried Michelle Dorr. As investigators carefully dug, a piece of fabric emerged from the earth. Soon, it became clear this was indeed Michelle's body. The discovery, after so many years, was an emotional moment for Michelle's family. Her father, Carl Dorr, stood by as they unearthed his daughter's remains, and with tears in his eyes, he said, "It's finally good to have a place to bury her. I'm just so sorry she ended up in the wrong place at the wrong time and met Hadden Clark." The haunting reality of the discovery was bittersweet. Though Michelle had been found, her life could never be returned. Despite the conclusion of Michelle's case, Hadden's story wasn't over. He began making further disturbing claims, now stating that it wasn't Hadden, but a persona named Kristen who was responsible for the murders. According to him, Kristen was a dominant, female version of himself that emerged when he lost control. Hadden insisted that this alternate personality was a way for him to avoid facing the horrors of what he had done. He described Kristen as being born out of the chaos of his childhood, and went on to detail how his parents had treated him growing up. They had raised him as though he were a girl, subjecting him to humiliation and abuse. "My brother and mother, everyone had a part in shaping me into who I am," he remarked, as though blaming others for his own monstrous actions. The disturbing revelations didn't end there. Hadden began mentioning names and locations, cryptic hints that suggested there might be more victims that had yet to be uncovered. He referred to a list of names: Doreen Vincent, Mary Mount, Sarah Pryor, Bonnie Beckett, Kate Wilder. This strange and unsettling admission left the detectives unsure of whether Hadden was playing some kind of sick game or revealing genuine details about his involvement in other disappearances. But even with the ambiguity, the clues he provided couldn't be ignored. In April 2000, the FBI took over, directing their attention to Cape Cod, where Hadden claimed there were more bodies buried under the sandy soil. But this cooperation came with a bizarre request. He would need to embody the persona of Kristen. To proceed, the FBI complied with his demands, providing him with a wig and women's clothing. Once satisfied, he guided the authorities to the burial sites. But the search yielded no new bodies, leaving the investigators empty-handed. Still, Hadden's unsettling behavior continued. In December of the same year, Hadden pointed investigators to his grandfather's property, where a chilling discovery awaited. On the property was an old small trailer, partially buried in the earth. As the team proceeded digging, they uncovered a 5-gallon plastic bucket. Inside it was a collection of jewelry, approximately 200 pieces, all of which Hadden claimed were trophies from his victims. Among them, they identified several pieces that had belonged to Laura Houghteling. However, many of the other items were unidentifiable, raising further concerns about the true extent of Hadden's crimes. While Hadden Clark may not have achieved the same level of infamy as other notorious killers like Ted Bundy or Jeffrey Dahmer, his crimes were no less horrific. Based on his actions, the FBI's Behavioral Science Unit speculated that Hadden may have killed as many as 20 people. At 72 years old, Hadden Clark is currently serving 2 consecutive 30-year sentences at the Eastern Correctional Institution in Western Maryland. Despite the horrors of his crimes, he is now eligible for parole, leaving those who have crossed paths with him deeply worried. Many fear that Hadden, even in his advanced years, still poses a significant threat to society. Do you believe his confessions in jail were simply fabrications, or there may be more victims yet to be uncovered? Let us know your opinions in the comments below. If you have any cases you'd like us to cover, feel free to suggest them. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to us for more captivating true crime stories. Until next time, stay safe.